Hello, people. Thanks for joining me. We're in the book of James. I want to read to you again this passage we've read a couple of times over the last few days. Just take a section out of it. James 1 and from verse 16 through to verse 17. And it says this: Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. God, the Father of lights. I wonder if this reference isn't a reference to the wonder of the stars in the sky, God's creation of the sun, the moon, the planets, the billions of galaxies, that we know that at the word of his mouth, he commanded these things to exist. He took them out of nothing. All there was in the beginning was God. That means that all there was in the beginning was immense power. And God, with his immense power, spoke the word, and the heavens were born. They continue to grow, apparently. Billions and billions of galaxies exist out there in outer space. And he's the one who made them all. And then it says this in the passage. It says, there is no variation with God. There might be variation every now and then amongst the planets, different stars, different types. But with God, there is no variation or shadow of turning. Let's talk about shadows for a moment. You know, sometimes we see a shadow, and a shadow can make you fearful, but it can't hurt you. A shadow can make you feel very scared. As a kid, I can remember seeing shadows outside my room and being petrified out of my shoes. I didn't want to get out of bed. And all it was at the end of the day when I woke up, it was a shadow. We see how God leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. It's not the valley of death, it's the shadow of death. But the interesting thing as it applies here is it says there is no shadow of turning with him. You know why? Because God doesn't move. If anybody's creating shadows out there in our lives, it's us. If there's a shadow in your life that dooms dark over you and something looms over your life, it's not because God has moved. He is consistent. He does not move. And so we have to own, I guess, in an amazing way, we have to own responsibility for the shadows that we sometimes go through. Those shadows of pain and suffering because we moved away from God. God hasn't moved. He hasn't punished us. Get under the light of God's divine lightness and the shadow leaves. When we decide that we've got a better truth than the truth of the Word of God, and we move out of the shadow of his truth, and we find ourselves in darkness, whose fault is that? That God's fault? God hasn't moved. If anybody's moved, it's us. Look for biblical examples of this. They're kind of all over the place. You know, we talk about the shadow of God's protection, being under the shadow of his wings. And he would call us as little chicks to come under the shadow of who he is in order to protect and to preserve us. God does not move. If anyone moves, it's not us, it's not God, it's certainly going to be us. And when we move out of the beauty of the light of God's truth and the light of God's blessing in our lives. So often we think, well, there's got to be more to our Christian life than just this. Surely I can add some other truth with a small t to this truth, even though it's a big truth. And we find ourselves moving out of the light of God's beautiful blessing into the shadow of darkness. And the longer you move, the darker it becomes. The wonder of it is that God says, come back into the light. It's much better in the light. It's much warmer in the light. You're more protected in the light. You can see the path clearer in the light. You can do a whole lot more if you just stay under the light of God's never, ever moving shine on your life. So let's do that. Let's think to ourselves, what kind of shadows have we moved into? Because some people are attracted to the shadows because they're dark there and they can get on with doing all the devious stuff that they want to do because they think no one can see them. Psalm 139 is very clear that there is nowhere that I can go, nowhere at all where I could be out of God's sight. Even if I flee to the darkness, he's there. If I go to the bottom of the sea, He is there. If I go to the other side of the world, God is there, and He is the light. Maybe you need some of His light to shine into your darkness today. Maybe there's a darkness of a relationship gone wrong. Maybe there's darkness in your family or your work life or your financial life. Let the light of God shine into that darkness and into that shadow, and watch what happens. You see, in the light, order is established, or in some cases, re-established. When the light, there is the beauty of being able to see what we're doing, to be able to see the wood for the trees. When we live in darkness, we stumble our way through. Get close to God, live in the light of His truth and His presence, and everything changes. Have a good day.